Today, we have Eddie Vidal, Manager of Enterprise Support Services at the University of Miami. Eddie has over 20 years experience in various areas of IT. His focus is primarily on service delivery and support for IT infrastructures. His current position is Manager Enterprise Support Services for the Information Technology Department at the University of Miami. Eddie currently serves as HDI's Southeast Regional Director, President of South Florida HDI Local Chapter, and is a member of the HDI Desktop and Member Advisory Board. He was recently selected to chair the Virtualization Track at Fusion 11 Conference and Metrics and Measurement Track for HDI 2012 Conference. Eddie has also been published in HDI's Support World magazine. On a personal note, I've had the opportunity to meet Eddie several times, and I can tell you that he's dedicated to his craft, and I'm sure you'll find today's presentation interesting and engaging. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Eddie.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate that introduction. I'm wondering, who are you talking about? But I want to thank ThoughtRock for having me on here. And my goal here is to share with you our case study and what we've done here at the University of Miami. Let me go back to the other slide. But what I want to do is, I came to the University of Miami a couple years ago, and when I first started as the service desk manager, there were really no metrics and there was no way to really measure what we were trying to do with our employees. So when I came in here, because I'm a numbers person and I'm very objective, I want to try to understand what my responsibilities are in my work and try to understand people, and I work better that way. And I thought, well, you know, as an employee, I'd like to be able to tell my team what my expectations of them are. So when I put this plan together, one of the goals was to keep it very simple. And then I also needed to communicate and educate to everybody why it's important to use metrics, and I'll communicate that throughout this presentation. But also it was important to get their buy-in. We needed to get their buy-in because they were part of this solution. They were going to be part of this new plan that we were developing and that we were implementing. And then this also helped create a professional development program for each of the individuals on our team. So one of the things when we start setting expectations, it's like, do we know what's expected of us? I work here at the university, and I'm wondering sometimes, well, what are the expectations? Do I only sit down with my boss once a year? Do I only understand what is expected of me during the annual performance review? Well, I think that if I knew throughout my day-to-day job what my expectations are, I think I would do a better job. And I feel that if I communicate that on an ongoing basis with these metrics and dashboards that we've implemented here, that our team would do better, work better, and provide better customer service. And I also think that if you sit down with them, it's not that you're sitting down with them and telling them, hey, look, this is what you did wrong. No, you also want to point out the strengths that they have, maybe work on those weaknesses. But how many of us like to hear that we've done a good job? I mean, how many of us like to hear that we've been praised? How many of us have received a written letter from maybe our manager or a customer and have kept that up on our wall in our office because we're very happy or we're really proud of being able to do that? So those are other reasons that I felt that this would work and why we implemented this expectation in these plans.
Great. Thanks, Eddie. We're going to do something a little different today. If I could interrupt just for 1 second, we're going to take some polls. So I'm going to launch our first poll. You should see on your screen for the audience, do you know what is expected of you? So I guess on your desk, is it true that your expectations are clear, whether you're an analyst or manager? So we're starting to see some poll results come in here. You should see those on your screens. Pretty interesting, Eddie. What do you think? We've got 87, 88% saying yes, they do.
Well, that's great. And I think depending on the role that you are in your position, if you're more of in a task-oriented role, for example, at the service desk, I think it's better. You know more of what's expected of you. But when you start getting into management or in the positions that I have, it's a little bit harder. It's based on team goals. It's based on projects that you're working on. And, I mean, this is not any different than having a family. I mean, and the reason that I put this picture up here is to show that there are expectations that you have for your family depending on your kids and what age they are. And this is no different than the work environment. So when your kids are young and younger than 5 years old, the expectations are for them to say please and thank you and things like that. But when they get to be older and they get to be teenagers and they're in high school, one of the things that happens in school is that they get a report card. And you know exactly how they're doing. So they come home with straight A's, or they come home on the honor roll, or whatever their GPA is, you know how they're doing. And I try to tie that in. I go, that is no different than the work environment. I want to be able to provide these report cards to our individuals on our team. I want them to be able to know how they're doing on a daily basis. So that's another reason why we implemented this program. So why did we do this? Well, definitely we want to recognize our top performer, but we also wanted to show that we care. Back in 2006, like I had mentioned before, there were no metrics at all here. Morale was down. We couldn't communicate how well we were doing, and there were too many generalizations we're saying about the customers being happy or unhappy. Desktop support or some other teams would say, well, you guys did this and you guys did that, and I'd say, well, can you provide me some examples? And it was not really to be defensive. It was more to tell me what we're doing wrong, give me a specific example so I know how to correct this. So what we tried to do is and like I had mentioned before, we did specific performance levels. What we did is we're going to be measuring 8 different metrics, or we do, and I'm going to talk about those. But some of them are based on a team performance and some are based on individuals. But also, because at the beginning they didn't understand why we needed to start tracking incidents, it was more of an educational thing to them. And one of the reasons that I would give them is that, well, we can plan for headcount. If you're telling me that you're very, very busy, I can show our management to say, hey, you know what, you're right. We're receiving all these calls. Our abandon rate is high. Our customer sat rates are down. And then if I can go ahead and justify that we need more people, I would use these metrics to justify that. Another example that recently happened here is that we had a Microsoft Exchange upgrade that affected 15,000 users. And so the help desk came back to us, or the service desk said, hey, look, we were getting killed with calls. We go, really? So then show us the number of tickets. So we go and we run a report, and we see that there were only 40 tickets out there. So it's like, well, wait a minute. Are they really that many calls coming in? Are they being documented all? And then this is another way to show them, hey, look, in order for us to justify or show what type of impact any system changes take or impact us, we need to open up those incidents to show that and to be able to track that. Also, if we're able to do measurements, we can also use this for promotions and salary increases, and that's something that they, of course, would like to see. When we started setting all this up, we didn't pull this out of the sky. We started doing some research, or I started doing some research. I started looking at what some best practices out there were. I started getting involved with HDI and started using their website for focus books and some of their toolbox documents out there. I went out and reached out to some HDI members and some other people within the local community here, and I asked them, hey, how are you measuring your service desk? Well, when we put this together, it wasn't the first time that it's going to work. We went through several revisions, and I won't exaggerate if I say that we went through 8 or 9 revisions. But one of the most important things that we needed to do here is to gain acceptance from our team. It was really important for them to say, hey, look, this is what I think is important. So a lot of the revisions involved them, and they would come back and say, well, this doesn't make sense, or this really wouldn't apply to us, and that's why we were able to gain their acceptance. Also, not only when we gained their acceptance, we had to take this up to our management team to say, hey, look, can we use this? Can we apply these performance metrics, and can we apply this to our annual performance review? So one of the things that we drafted is an acceptance letter, and if you notice that I highlighted the word participated, it's really important for them to be part of this, for them to have some skin in the game, and for them to be able to accept that, hey, I put together my own performance improvement criteria, and I'm able to meet these standards because I'm more emotionally attached to it because I was able to participate and have some input into this.
All right, Vince, Vince, I don't know why I always call you Vince, Eddie, but it's stuck in my brain. I do it to your face, too, which is important. Sorry. Eddie, we're going to do a poll right now as well. Let me just launch that really quickly. 1 second. the question is, do you have an incentive program for your desk? So we'll launch that now and see how things come back from people.
And I ask this question because I think it's important for individuals to have some kind of incentive. I mean, you're going ahead and putting something together, and what we did is we were doing this based on a monthly basis. And what we would do is we asked that the goal was to be rewarded is that you must meet a 90% or higher score. And we had, at the time, we have 7 analysts or service desk technicians. And only one of them was eligible to be able to get this prize. And we would use the 8 different categories that I'm going to go over. But if we ever had a tie, the employee entering the most service requests and incidents would be the winner.
Pretty cool.
Just to go over some of the...
It's closed here, and wow, it looks like 90% of our participants and 75% of you responded. Say no.
Well, that's good, and I really feel that's important because I think it adds more validity to what you're doing, and it gets your team more involved. One of the other things I want to share on our case study is some of the tools that we used at that time and what we currently use. For our service desk and our ACD at the time, we were using a Nortel Symposium system. But currently, we're using a Cisco IPCC system to monitor our calls or for our call center. For our incident management tracking system, we use a product called Comco, which is by Microsoft. And the reason we do that because in our organization, we do a lot of chargeback and billing and monthly recurring costs. And this was sort of like a telephony type system that allowed us to do this. When I was managing that help desk or the service desk, I was very fortunate that I had somebody with database administrative talents, and they were able to do crystal reports for us. And we used these reports, and we were able to use some Excel spreadsheets and able to put all these reports together. This slide is just to show you that before I started, the importance of opening incidents wasn't really pounded upon. And as you can see from year 1, going to year 2, the increase, and I put the red arrows there for you to notice that the increases it was almost a 50% increase from year 1 to year 2. And then probably a 40 or so % increase from year 2 to 3. And the reason was is that we educated them. We told them that this was a requirement that you needed to open up incidents for all the calls that would come in. And it involved an educational level to say, hey, look, this is really, really important. Now, granted, the goal would be is, hey, let's get 100%. As you notice in year 5, we're not there. But that's a work in progress. And we're still working on getting that 1-to-1 ratio. The slide shows you the 8 different areas that we're going to be talking about and what I measure, but each of them is given a certain weight. So as you can see, the call monitoring, incident tracking, and % of service requests entered are given a 15% weight. Some of the other ones are given a 10% weight. And if you're going to take this type of program back to your organization, you can apply whatever weight you decide is more important. But we felt that the metrics and the measurements that were more important, we added a higher weight to that. So the first metric that we do is a call tracking. And of course, that goes back to that chart that I showed you that at first we weren't tracking all the calls, and we think it's really important. And so our goal was at 70% because when you start setting up goals for people, you want them to be reachable. Granted, you want 100%. But when we were in the 40 or 30% range when we started and we wanted to do something that was reachable, we started with a 70% goal. So basically, if you had 100 tickets or 100 calls that came in, you needed to open up at least 75 tickets. And then it was weighted differently. If you opened up between 50 and 69% of your tickets, you would get different points. But this is the first metric that we would use for our performance management dashboard. Now, this is an obvious answer or an obvious question to a lot of people that have been in the industry for a while, but it's like, well, why do we track incidents? But for us, remember, we had to educate our individuals, and we want to be able to build a repository for a knowledge base and to be able to do some education and some customer training. We also would hope that eventually when we build this knowledge base, it can lead us to a level 0 support. And of course, it's going to lead us to problem change and release management.
All right, Eddie.
Keep in mind that when I started here.
Sorry.
Go ahead, John.
Let's do another poll now, the last of 3 polls. We're going to ask the question, do you track all of your incidents? Yes, no, or gee, I'm not sure. So let's see what the audience comes back with on this one.
And I would hope to see 100% on that. And that's like when you're setting up goals for your team members. Some of these goals should be reachable. But also, one of the things I was going to say is keep in mind that when I started here, we were more of a dispatch center, and we did a lot of things different. And in order to come in and make some changes, it was a lot of cultural changes, too. We needed to educate, and we needed to start tracking all the incidents.
Cool. All right, so very good. The poll seems to be completed here. 80% say yes. Oh, 79. 15% say no, and 6% say not sure. I don't know, Eddie, if you want to speculate on what that not sure might represent.
Well, basically, I mean, if you're not sure, the question to be asked is when a call comes into your service desk, are they opening up a ticket in a service desk tool? Hopefully you have a service desk tool. If you're a small organization and you can't afford those service desk tools, I highly recommend if you can build an Access database. If not, create an Excel spreadsheet. I think it's really important to track all your incidents because you can use them to justify many things, and you can gain a good understanding of what are your top type calls. If it's because it's password resets, which happens to be our top #1 call, well, that leads into problem management, and how can we get to the root cause of this issue, and how can we resolve it to eliminate or at least decrease the number of calls that come in. For that other percentage that are not tracking their incidents, I highly recommend and go out and look at a lot of HDI literature and a lot of industry literature out there that says these are the reasons why you should be doing that. The other metric that we do is the service request and the incident accuracy. This is the most time-consuming part of doing this, and you wonder, well, do I have a full team of individuals that are starting to do or are helping us with this? Well, not really. At the time, we have a student that helps us look at service requests, and what we did is we had 7 analysts answering phones, and we would take 10 of their service requests and 10 of their incidents, and we would use them for grading. And one of the most important things when we do the criteria for grading is location, location, location. And why do I say that? Well, here at the University of Miami, we have a couple different campuses, and on the Coral Gables campus, we have over 50 different buildings. So if we're putting the wrong location in for one of our technicians that goes out there and they walk to the wrong building, it's going to waste some time on their end, and it's going to cut into our service level agreement. If we say that we're going to solve this within X amount of time, that's already cutting into that time. So the important thing here is for the service request or the incident tracking, here are some of the questions that we ask. And I have a template for this, and my email address is on the last slide. So if you want any of these templates after this presentation, just shoot me an email, and I'll be more than happy to send this. But the big thing when I started with this measurement, it was previous to my employment here at University of Miami. I also worked in higher ed at FIU, and one of the goals over there was to contact the customer within 48 hours, and I'm thinking to myself, that's ridiculous. Well, let's bring it down to 24, and basically we got it down to 4 hours. There's another thing that we do for the criteria about the service request or the incident is, are the diary entries user-friendly? And what do I mean by that? Let me read off to you a couple questions to say, hey, look, this is what we're looking for when I mean diary entries. So are they updated to state when the next expected entry or work is scheduled with the user? If the customer, or is the customer informed when the next visit or the work on the service request is to be performed? Let's say you set up an appointment with a customer in advance, and this is mainly on the second level, or maybe even from the service desk. Has that been entered into the diary entry? If you tried to reach out to the customer, and this is more on the second level, or when you contact them on the phone, is there an entry stating the means of communication? For example, did you contact them via email, voicemail, or in person? And if there is a statement on there saying that if you did do a visit, because this incident is not just for first level, it includes a second level. If you did a visit, is there some mechanism that you let the customer know you were there, maybe by a service receipt? And if you answered yes to all those questions, then you're meeting the certain criteria that we're looking for in the accuracy. But if not, then you would be answering no. And that's the same for the customer being kept in the loop or the sign-off being obtained. There's a lot of things in there that we ask to say, hey, are we putting in all the information correctly? Are we looking for the information that we've asked from management and from this program that we're trying to implement?
Hey, Eddie, we have a couple of questions. One going back maybe a couple slides. Sorry, I was asleep at the switch here. From Matt, should a follow-up call be logged as a new request, or are the notes added to the existing call satisfactory?
You can take that approach either way. It depends on your organization and how you want to track that. The thing is, if you open up a new call, then that's just another incident that comes in, and then you can do that one-for-one matching based on the number of calls that come in versus the incidents. But a lot of times, if the ticket is still open and you don't have to reopen it, my suggestion is to add it to the existing ticket.
Very good. And another question is coming from Paran. How does location tie into service criteria?
I'm not really sure what you mean by that question, but it's important to, when we're doing the accuracy of a service request or an incident, one of the things are you got to make sure that the location's correct. And a lot of times, if you're calling a bank or you're calling any call center, one of the first questions that they usually ask is your information or your contact information correct, like your phone number, your address, your email address. So this is no different for us here at the service desk. We want to make sure that, number one, when they call in, we're verifying the information. And number two, that when we open up this incident, and we have to send somebody out there, that we're sending them to the correct location.
Great. All right. We have a couple more questions, and I think we can take these. In the interest of time, we'll keep moving ahead because I know we have lots more information, but it's great to have dialogue, so keep them coming. From Chantel, issues we're expecting now is that the information captured in the incidents isn't all there, and the analysts are using the excuse that they do not know what to ask the customer. Do you have a set of generic questions that could apply to most issues that service desk analysts could ask?
I myself don't have a set of questions. I have a set of questions for call monitoring, which I'm going to review in a little bit. I have some questions in this template that need to be answered, and those are more of what the expectations are for the entries in the incident. But I'm sure if you do some research out there, or if not, I'm sure I can come up with a couple of questions and send those your way.
Fantastic. And last question for now, how do you track first call resolution?
We do it based on if a customer calls into our service desk and our service desk analyst is able to resolve that on the first initial call and they're able to resolve the customer's problem. That's how we track first call resolution. I know at times maybe you can send the call to another member within your team, and that's still for us considered first call resolution. Other organizations, if they still send it to maybe a second level team and it's still resolved within that initial phone call, they consider that first call. We don't, but it all depends on how you want to go ahead and classify that in your organization.
Fantastic. We have another question, and just a time check. It is 25 after 12, but we love the dialogue and interaction, so I'm going to suggest that we'll keep taking these. I think, Eddie, you're probably halfway through or so. So we'll take this one more, and then we'll forge through the presentation a little bit further. We can go as late as 1. Hopefully that works for most of our audience as well. But I don't want to shut this off because it's obviously adding value to the attendees. So next question from Matt, how do you flag a ticket as an FCR in your system or just generally?
Well, for us, we would run reports based on our database administrator and my supervisor would run reports using the system. Now, I don't have a flag or a field that I can say this is a first call resolution. What we're doing is we're looking at the call and seeing that it was resolved on that initial person. So if it's opened by Jane and it's closed by Jane, then it's a first call resolution. And the reason I state it, because this is the way we do it, our incidents, if they're escalated to another person or another team, it does not come back like a 360-degree loop back to our service desk for them to close it. So if it's gone to another user or another team, then it's closed by them, and that's how we can tell whether it's a first call resolution for our team or not.
Fantastic.
So let me go ahead and
forge ahead.
Yeah, let me go ahead and keep going. So I'm going to try to zip through some of these really quick. One of the biggest things that I think is important is to make your questions very objective. When you have a question and the answer may be maybe, not sure, or I think so, then it's hard to really classify that, and that's why I make it very objective to yes or no. Two other categories that we measured are the percent of calls. Are the users calling in the published number? A lot of times they would call the help desk analyst directly, and we tried to eliminate that. And we wanted to make sure that the analyst would answer their percent of the calls, and that's more of a team thing. So for example, if 100 calls came in and I had 5 analysts, they should be answering 20% of the calls, plus or minus 5%. Granted, if they take time off because they're going to a training class or a meeting, we try to account for that. But since a lot of this stuff was done manually, that was very difficult to do. But we're looking at more of a long-run thing or long-term thing versus a one-day or one-hour thing. Same with entering service requests. If there was 20 service requests that day and you had 4 analysts, you want to make sure that they put in about 5 each. And you give a plus or minus percentage to allow for some person doing a little bit more or less. Here's the first call resolution metric. We wanted to make sure that this was included, and this was 10%. And a lot of it is used to analyze and make sure that the skill level of the analyst is up to par. So if we see one individual that is closing out on first call resolution a lot of calls, we understand that they're getting and they're understanding our environment and they're able to troubleshoot the problem. But if, and more than likely for newer individuals, that first call resolution is going to be low because they're still learning your environment.
Vince, I don't know what is wrong with my brain today. Eddie, got another question. Do you track a decrease in calls because you are good at problem management? And can you say that less calls on the same subject is a good thing? Your metrics would go, I'm not sure what this means, your metrics go down though.
Less calls on one issue would be good because you're putting together a good problem management process. Over our environment, I can't say that we do that over here, so I would not be able to answer that question based on my experience here at University of Miami. But based on problem management methodology, and if their calls are going lower because you have a good process in place, then you know what's working. One of the other metrics that I want to talk about is the percent available time. Is the reason that we have our service desk analysts, they're supposed to be on the call, and they're here for 8 hours, and our goal is for them to be on 6.5 hours. And we use the ACD time, which is the time that they're waiting for calls, their DN time, which is direct number if they're using the phone to make outbound calls, and the waiting time. And then we subtract the not ready time, and that's what makes the percent available time metric for us. We also do the average talk time, and our goal is 5 minutes or less. If you go over 5 minutes, then it's 0 points. But and the reason I put this goal is because our average talk time is about 3.5 minutes, and we definitely want that to increase because that means that we're spending more time with our customers, which will probably increase first call resolution. I say, you know what, if you're working on a problem and you can resolve it within 15 minutes, keep going at it. We want to be able to, and we'd save money when it comes to total cost of ownership if we can resolve the calls at first level.
Eddie, got a great related question here. Do you track service desk staff satisfaction? And if so, what results have you seen?
No, we don't. We don't do satisfaction for our own help desk employees, and that's something that we do need to work on. We used to do customer satisfaction surveys, but we haven't done any for our own staff. No.
Great. And a related follow-on question. In your opinion, which are the best tools to measure customer satisfaction?
Well, I think HDI has a CSI type customer satisfaction index tool out there. A lot of service desk tools may have a survey form in there, but what I'll do in this presentation, I have 5 questions that I normally ask for customer sat, and you can use that to get started if you don't have a program in place.
Fantastic.
One of the other metrics that we did is call monitoring, and basically we would cover 10 calls per month. And like I had mentioned before, if you think that, oh, there's a lot of time involved in this, we used a student. It took a lot of time to get started, but after a while, it would take about an hour per user. So it would take about an hour to rate 10 calls, and it really wasn't that bad. And our goal for that would be a 70% score, and I'm going to cover what the criteria is for that. The criteria for the call monitoring, it's based on a 4-part scoring. It's greeting the customer, key points during the call, ending the call, and the behavioral type questions. That last one could be the more subjective type. But as you see, these questions are basically, you're going to be answering a yes or no to this, and then this is how you get the scores. So for example, if I'm greeting the customer, one of the things that I do is, you must mention the customer's name twice, and that's why I put name square. When you answer the call, you say who you are, but then when the person says, hey, John, thank you for calling, then sometime throughout that call, you definitely want to mention their name. This is no different than having a personal conversation with someone that you just meet. How many times do we forget their name? Or how many times do they forget your name? But how does it make you feel that if they remember your name during the conversation and they say that? That's no different than talking to your customer on the phone. You want them to feel important, and you want to definitely say their name at least twice.
All right, Eddie, we have a couple more questions, and I thought this was a good place to interrupt because clearly I'm not scoring well on that metric today. 2 questions here. Maybe a comment, and maybe there was a misunderstanding. As calls get more complicated, are you penalizing your support staff for solving calls at first level in longer than 5 minutes instead of forwarding it to second level? I think you touched on that a little bit, but maybe just a clarification on that.
No, we are not. And you're going to get one call that maybe you're going to be on there for 25 minutes. But after 100 calls, if your average talk time in my organization, in our organization, it's been under 5 minutes. So yes, they do have those calls that they spend time on, and you want to encourage that because ultimately you want to solve the customer's problem. They want it solved, and it ties into total cost of ownership. But no, we don't penalize someone. Now, if someone's coming in with 10-minute average talk time over the month, then we're going to see if their first call resolution is at 100%. Well, maybe we're onto something, but that hasn't been the case for us.
Okay, great. And a second question here. Do you have a dedicated staff that handles the monthly scoring and metrics? How much time is usually needed to achieve analyst scoring?
Well, no, we don't. I mean, at first, putting any type of program together took some time. But once we get this going, like I mentioned before, 6 out of the 8 things that we're measuring here are automated because of our ACD or because of our service desk tool that we're able to run reports and we get a month end or we can get a daily report. That's all automated. The time-consuming part is tracking or monitoring your service requests and your call monitoring because that's a manual thing. But keep in mind that we have a student that does this. And if you have a big organization, that may be difficult. But if you're broken down into smaller teams and you have 6 or 7 individuals, like I said, if you're only doing 10 calls, it takes about an hour per person. So let's call that 8 hours a month for call monitoring. And then let's call it for the actual service request and incident tracking. Maybe that's another hour per individual. So you're spending about 16 hours a month. So it's not like it's a full-time person. And if those that work in higher ed that can hire students, use them. Those that have organizations that maybe have an administrative assistant, give that to them. Or maybe have some person off the phone and maybe rotate it on a monthly basis and give it to one of your analysts so they can listen to other people. If you have a trusting environment, that's easier to do. If you have a non-trusting environment, that may be a little bit more difficult.
Okay, one last question for now. Is it advisable to rate the employee performance based on customer feedback survey? And a comment, personally, I don't like this method.
That's not the only way to do it, but that is one of the criteria that you can use. Keep in mind, in the 8 things that I'm talking about here, I don't even touch on an area that I call bonus points. And bonus points are customer accommodations, professional development, and I'll touch a little bit more on that later.
Great. I lied. There is another question. Do you prioritize calls and work on them based on priority or just as they come in?
Well, when the calls come in to our service desk, it's based on when they come in. Now, you prioritize it if you have to escalate it to a second level. But for us, that they come in through the ACD, and we answer them as they come in.
Great, thanks. Let's roll on.
Okay. So here are some key points during the call. You definitely want to verify some of this information, and I'm going to go through this a little bit quick because I left this on the PowerPoint presentation, so after the fact, you can have these questions on there, and you can revert to them if you need to. Ending the call, you definitely want to offer further assistance, especially if you're in a sales-type environment. You definitely want to encourage future calls, and you want to allow the customer to have the last word. These are some of the things that may be a little bit more on the subjective end, but these are criteria and questions that we use in our call monitoring scoreboard. And then you definitely want to have a positive attitude, speak clearly, make sure that they don't have gum in their mouth, and that they're courteous and empathetic. And all those questions are on this call effectiveness monitoring spreadsheet. This is a capture of the spreadsheet. If you send me an email after the fact, I can go ahead and send this to you, and I'll send you the Excel spreadsheet. And basically, you're putting in a Y for a yes or a no if it was answered, and you're leaving it blank if it doesn't apply. And then the score will tabulate on the bottom, and it'll give you 10 calls per month to do this. One of the interesting things that we found out about taking it to another level is that when you're monitoring some calls and you're listening to it, in our system they needed to put the incident number in there. So then we would go to that incident and try to tie it in with the call, and you'd be surprised to see that sometimes they don't match. And sometimes it could be a mistake, or sometimes it involves some education. It's like, okay, well look, you put in this incident, you must have put in the wrong number. Make sure it follows your call and the incident and the call match. And it's really interesting if you do take it to the next level, what I think you can learn. Some of the other things is some organizations post, some don't. We don't. It could create competition. Sometimes it's friendly. Sometimes it's depending on your trust within your team members, you may be able to do it. In our organization, we're starting to post some of the team metrics, mainly the number of calls that are coming in, the number of incidents that are open, and the number of service requests that are open, and also our abandon rate. Here are the bonus points I spoke about. If you do any knowledge-based documentation and you contribute to our knowledge base, that adds up to some points in our scoreboard. Any seminars that you attended, so if you attended this and you take back some of the information that you gained from here and take it back to your team, that'll definitely count as bonus points. And those unsolicited customer commendations, we also use that as bonus points. Professional development, we added that in there. Also certifications, if you can get any HDI type certifications, Microsoft certifications, Vidal, that's all a bonus. And we want to encourage that because we want them to become better employees, and we want them to build their professional development for themselves too. Here's the surveys that I talked about. These are the 5 qualities that or 5 keywords that we're looking for when we do these surveys. And we stopped doing surveys. And you may ask, well, why did we do that? And the reason is it's important that when you do your survey, do something about it. So what we did is that if we scored, it was based on a rating of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. If you scored a 3 or below, then we would contact that customer and we would ask him, hey, why did you do the score? What was the issue? What is it that we need to do to improve? So the customer surveys, I think, are really important. There's a lot of tools out there for you to use. Here's a sample of the dashboard. Each of the weights for each of the metrics that we use. It involves the bonus points on the bottom, and then we asked each person to sign off on that and the date. Here's a sample of a scoreboard. So this is for Anthony. If you look at the bottom there, he scored an 89 that month. And you notice that the columns on the right, the work order and trouble ticket accuracy and the call monitoring are blank. That's because that's what we do manually on a monthly basis. And also the boxes on the bottom show you the percentages of how many points for each metric. Here's a morning report that we used, and I got a lot of this information by attending in the HDI Support Center's Managers class. And then basically we adapted this to our environment. But hopefully this is something to at least give you some ideas if you're not doing a morning report. This would also become a weekly and a monthly report. Here are some ideas for you to use. So hopefully you took away some things from this presentation. If you noticed, I'm trying not to make this complicated. I'm trying to keep it simple. I hope that there are some important metrics that you can take and use in your environment. And if you have nothing right now, maybe you want to start with 8, maybe you want to start with 4, but hopefully I've given you some stuff that you can apply to your job. That's just the bio page. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, John. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Eddie. Well, speaking of metrics, if we apply our metrics, I think you set a thought record for the most number of questions during a presentation, which is a great indicator of participant engagement and interest. So although you weren't sure who I was speaking about it at the front of the presentation, I think it's pretty clear you are dedicated to your craft, and I was confident that this would be interesting, even though I score so poorly on the name metric. Apologize once again. Some days are like that. If you could advance to the next slide, Eddie. Oh, so you did already. Sorry. We'll leave it here. Just a couple of housekeeping things. For those of you from the HDI Trillium who have joined us today, little reminder of upcoming events Wednesday, May 9th at Hart House, and some early bird discounts for the conference. So please remember to sign up for that. And I've been to a number of those, and they are generally quite informative and interesting. Oh, and if you could, Eddie, just go back and show your contact information again. Someone would like to see that. We will, as a reminder, be sending out copies of this presentation, so that it'll be on that as well. You'll get a link to the recording of today's presentation, so that you can share that and get access to any of this information. We do have another question, Eddie, as well. What are some of the executive type metrics that can be run to show the value of the service desk? That's coming from Rob.
Well, executive type, well, I mean, some of the ones that I use can be used, but it's all how you tell your story. I mean, if you're trying to say, hey, we need more resources, or if you're trying to share a story that you're doing a good job, customer satisfaction is a good metric. I mean, and keep in mind, I mean, if you're starting to follow IDLE best practices, we're in the business to satisfy our customers and align with our customers. And if we're showing that we're doing a good customer sat rate, if we're meeting our service levels, if we're like our mean time to repair, those are some of the things that are metrics that you can use for more senior management. I mean, they're not looking so much in detail. Like, they're not really going to care about an abandon rate, but they are going to care about that's going to tie into a customer sat rate that, oh, it's too difficult to get a hold of your service desk, or we're on hold too long. So that's how you would tie in some of the more specific metrics to the bigger, broader picture when it comes to your senior management. I hope I answered that question correctly.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. Any other thoughts or comments? If anyone wants to comment on any information or share anything, you can certainly do that through the chat or question window as well. Be happy to respond. While we're waiting for that, if not, I will thank you again, Eddie. It's a fantastic presentation, and as I said, great to see all the interaction and participation from the attendees. And we will send out a follow-up link to the recorded session so you can review it or share it with colleagues. So I think I just answered that last question. That's how you'll get a copy of the presentation. If anyone has specific requests for templates that Eddie showed during this presentation, let us know, and we can approach him and see if he's willing to share those as well. So that was a question that just popped up. And if there's nothing else, thank you very much for attending.